Good afternoon, everybody. Hello, my name is Giles Bailey. I'm a policy advisor at Vianova, a mobility management company working across Europe. As part of our industry engagement and thought leadership work, we've been running a series of webinars on the most topical mobility issues. This is our 7th webinar, and the others are available on our website. We've been witnessing changes in mobility, global mobility, brought about by new business models, innovation, micro-mobility. This is supporting as well as challenging existing transport modes. And now we have the unprecedented turmoil in cities around the world brought about by the COVID pandemic. While much has occurred in the market in 2020 and into 2021, in this webinar, we will look to examine the role of mobility hubs in shaping best practice in post-pandemic mobility toolkit. A few thoughts just to briefly get us started. We're facing challenging times. A few photos from my home city of London of empty streets, empty offices, people reconsidering the role of public transport and how they get around the city, and particularly in previously very busy areas. But more broadly, questioning the role of public transport in its entirety in making cities work in markets around the world. And will this usher in a new era of how we look at cities and how we look at mobility and the economic value of cities? The statistics on the right-hand side are from CityMapper in markets across the globe, looking at the decline in traffic earlier this year in the height of the pandemic and some of the challenges cities are facing in terms of managing mobility and thinking about mobility. But more broadly, and again, more positively, cities across the world do continue to invest in some of the classic modes of public transport. For example, this article from Toulouse in the south of France of a new metro line being developed. Again, in my home city, reimagining how the business area in the City of London can be used by bringing in more housing into a previously very office-focused area. Thinking about the tourism market, and although it's suffering significant declines, tourism is a very important part of stimulating mobility in the economies of cities around the world. And what's the future of tourism? Quite positively, cities are thinking about how they reimagine space and bring more pedestrian uses, more micromobility uses into their streets. And finally, and quite critically, sustainability, the European Green Deal, and focusing in on how we bring clean, green, low carbon transport to our cities around the world. So today we're going to have 4 guest speakers. Each will give a relatively short presentation, and there'll be 1 or 2 questions from myself to each speaker as we go through the 4. There's plenty of time for questions and answers at the end, so please type your questions into the Q&A box and I'll monitor those and bring them into the discussion at the very end. And we'll finish off with final thoughts from the panelists. Firstly, I'd like to introduce Rebecca Karbaumer from the city of Bremen in Germany. She has been leading on sustainable mobility and coordinating EU projects over the last 8 years at the Ministry of Climate Protection, the Environment, Mobility, Urban and Housing Development for the state of Bremen. In particularly, she has been implementing the local car sharing action plan. She has a master's from the University of Bremen, but completed her undergraduate degree at the University of Missouri in the US, where she also briefly worked. Over to you, Rebecca.
Thanks very much, Charles. Definitely the ministry name is a mouthful. I'm still practicing it, so well done. I usually just say the Ministry of Transport for the city-state of Bremen. And we have more than 18 years of experience with mobility hubs. So next slide, please. Already, I'll just whiz through it. So welcome to Bremen. This is the visual impression that you get. Hopefully you'll be able to see it in person someday. Just for a bit of context, the city of Bremen has around 570,000 inhabitants, and we're located in the north of Germany, and travel quite sustainably on a regular basis. More than 60% of daily trips are done using sustainable travel modes like walking, cycling, and public transport. However, we are still a city that is littered with cars, with parked cars, definitely. And that's our main motivation for doing mobility hubs. Next slide, please. So with mobility hubs, we are tackling resource and space efficiency in the city. It's all about regaining public street space back from cars. That is our main motivation. Obviously, we're also trying to reduce transport-related emissions, improve social inclusion and accessibility for people of all ages and abilities, as well as quality of life in the city. And I think this is one of the central points when I advise cities interested in planning mobility hubs, to focus on what you want to accomplish with a mobility hub. Be quite clear about your goals and about asking that question, can I achieve those goals with implementing a mobility hub? If the answer is no, then don't do it. There's maybe something more efficient. But for us, Bremen is quite clear with mobility hubs, you can that issue of public space from parked cars. And we do it with, next slide, please. There are Mobilpunkte. These are mobility hubs. Mobilpunkte are the larger hubs that we've been planning since 2003. We have 10 of them. They feature 4 to 12 car share vehicles. They're located near public transport stops, feature cycling infrastructure, and so on. And first and foremost, most important thing is that they are clearly visible and easily accessible for all citizens, and combine a number of transport modes. Next slide, please. In 2013, we started supplementing the large hub network with smaller decentralized hubs called Mobilpunktchen. They feature 2 to 3 car share vehicles, with the same bicycle infrastructure and on the same principle, easy accessibility and easy visibility and high visibility in the neighborhoods. Next slide, please. So you can see we have a network of a number of hubs. Some of them are centralized, larger hubs, and decentralized, but they're all based on that backbone of components: car sharing, cycling infrastructure, bicycle parking, and clear signage and visibility. Obviously, they can comprise other elements like the large hubs, public transport stops, and in future we will be planning parking bays for cargo bikes, free floating electric scooters, bike sharing, and so on and so forth, with a goal of implementing 8 to 10 new hubs each year. Next slide, please. One interesting sort of side note about our mobility hubs is that even without providing that specified space for electric scooters, the scooters already gravitate toward the mobility hub. So the hub in itself has a way of organizing or structuring what some people would call chaos in that public realm and drawing visibility to it. Next slide, please. And finally, mobility hubs have a number of benefits. I already mentioned our motivation for planning mobility hubs. And then this is the payout at the end. We have increased visibility and accessibility for sustainable and shared transport modes in the city because of the attention mobility hubs draw to them. With the mobility hubs, we're also allowed or able to provide tailored solutions for the neighborhoods. Each mobility hub is an individualized design to meet the needs of that neighborhood. So there is no one size fits all solution. And finally, that joint branding, the Mobilpunkt that we established in 2003, provides increased visibility, but also increased political support and political backing. And we've been seeing that across Europe with our European project partners in the Share North project, how important branding is to gauge political support for the idea of mobility hubs. So anyway, that said, I look forward to the discussion and the other panelists' contributions. Thanks very much.
Thank you very much, Rebecca. So I'll just ask probably 2 questions to start off. So maybe could you tell us a little bit more about how you locate or decide where to locate the 2 versions of mobility hubs? Mm-hmm. And maybe explain a little bit more about your thinking, and then I'll come to the second question after that.
Yeah, so site selection is based on a lot of years of experience, and also obviously understanding how the shared mobility market works, what is a use case, what is required to provide a business case for shared mobility. So in Bremen, we look for neighborhoods first and foremost with a suitable density of private residents who will use the shared mobility services, as well as businesses who use it. The businesses tend to use the car sharing, for example, during business hours, 9 to 5, and private users evenings and weekends. And with a good balance of residential or potential user density, you have a business case for a hub. Obviously, accessibility is important for the site, that it's easy to find, that people feel safe going there. So no back lots, no underpasses, especially the issue gender equality and gender mainstreaming in the public realm. The mobility hubs play an important role, and that plays an important role in the site selection as well. And also, just is there a space available for what we want to do? And in a city that's very dense, like the city of Bremen, it is walkable, bikeable, and short distances. We found that the decentralized stations, the smaller hubs, but in a closer distance to one another, are the way to go. We've been quite successful with that. It's always easier to find space for 2 to 3 parking bays for car share vehicles and some additional services instead of in the huge hubs. I mean, there is a Swedish partner of mine from the University of Helsingborg calls it, or Lund, sorry, calls it space wars, and that is definitely always an issue, I think, for almost any city. So yeah, it's a balance of knowing about the business case, what do providers need to have provide good services, what do the users need, what's the demand, and also what is the available space we have from what we want to accomplish. Our goal in Bremen is to reduce the distance between the hubs to a maximum of 300 meters between each.
Excellent. Thank you very much. I was going to ask you a question about data, but I'll probably bring that up a bit later on. Let's go on to our second speaker, and that's going to be Sverker Haraldson from the city of Malmö in Sweden. Sverker works in the Public Environment Unit, delivering various tests of new policy solutions for the city. These have included e-scooters, but over a 16-year career, he's had various roles in mobility, behavioral change, event sponsorship, and urban life development. Earlier in his career, Sverker worked as a marketing director in the florist industry. Over to you, Sverker.
Thank you. Great to be here. My name is Sverker Haraldson, which is very hard to say in any language except for Swedish. I was working for the city of Malmö. I moved to another city 3 weeks ago, but I will still talk about the Malmö case. Malmö, for you guys who don't know the city, is the third largest city of Sweden, about 350,000 inhabitants. In summer, early autumn 2019, there were 5 scooter operators establishing in the city, and the city was rather pragmatic about the approach, both from the city and our department. Basically, electrical scooters are bicycles in the name of the law, or in the sense of the law. That meant that we said there were no special legislation for electrical scooters, and thus we didn't need any kind of special contracts between city and operator or letters of conduct or whatever. They are bikes, and that means that the laws regarding bikes are applicable, and that was basically it when we started out. That also meant, since we didn't have any contracts or discussions, there was little communication between the city and the operators from summer 2019. Next slide, please. The test of scooter zones, which I'm here to speak about, was a project that was started in December 2019. And it was to approach the parking situation in crowded areas where many different traffics were combined. There were bicycles, there were pedestrians, there were cars, and there were scooters. The test was run by a small team, and we started out very quickly with having contact with all the operators to learn about their experience and their knowledge from other cities. And the team reached a concept called parking areas for scooters. I put it at parking areas because there's no legislation that we can use to say this is a place where you're supposed to park your scooter. It was a test. It is a test limited in time and in volume, how many we can do. So to do a test, we needed to find a quick solution. We wanted a solution that was flexible and very cost effective. And we also understood that we couldn't have any technical solutions. We couldn't use GPS signals or any kind of a database to see if to control this test. Basically, this test is about a change of attitudes. The operators always using the zones to place the available scooters that they set out on the streets for hire. And thus, the riders will be more and more used to the concept of a scooter zone as the place where you pick up your scooter. And if you come to the same destination, it's also a place where you drop off your scooter. So it's basically it's a test of changing attitude. Next slide, please. This is how we did a scooter zone. We used printed boards of marine plywood, outdoor plywood. It basically has two components. It's base plates, which are, as you see on this picture, they are basically one color print. We print out a parking grid combining space for 5 scooters. The base plates are connected to the ground. It can be asphalt, it can be stones, whatever. We drill through the base plate, we force down an expander bolt, and thus the base plate is secured to the ground. And we use signs which are printed on both sides. They are fastened into a triangle shape, and then we position them with these concrete traffic obstacles that I guess every city uses. And they are not connected to the ground, so they can actually be moved around if we want to. And basically the sign says, this is an electrical scooter zone. Thank you for putting your scooter here. And that was all. Next slide, please. This is how they look in reality. This is a flexible solution. You can see here we're using we have one scooter zone which is close to the university area in the city, and another scooter zone which is basically on a big bridge over pedestrian or bike, the big bike lane, and lots of buses are stopping in this area on both sides of the street. And we can have them smaller or bigger. The smaller ones have volume for 10 scooters, the bigger ones have volume for 20 scooters. Next slide, please. Being a flexible solution to construct and produce a scooter zone like this, it's a cost about 300, 400 euro, printing, material, and establishing a zone. And this is from when we established zone in July 2020. And basically it takes 2 guys with a smooth toolbox, 1 hour to build a scooter zone in an area. And this area is very special because this is, you can see the same zone 4 months later, and still on an autumn day in Malmö. Lots of rain has been falling, but still the zone is working the way it should be. And this zone is also very special because we as the city needed to make groundwork on this square in the city. Actually, this zone was moved, and that also takes about 1 hour to move a zone, establishing one area and going to another area. So it's a very easy concept. It's very flexible. It's easy to move around, and I think it's very cost effective. Then, does it work? Next slide, please. The test started in June 2020 and runs to May 2021. We have a total of 20 zones within the central parts of the city. They are, as I said, in different sizes, between 10 and 20 scooter capacity. We follow up this test by visiting all zones and basically counting how many scooters are in a 50-meter radius from the zone. both in the zone and how many are placed in the area nearby. And we could expect people to actually put the scooter in the zone. We also counted the bicycles in the same area because it is an impression that people look at bicycles something that the eye is used to. So if there's lots of bicycles littering an area, we don't react the way we react if we see a couple of scooters in the same area, not in a good parking space. So every follow-up going to all zones, counting how many scooters and bicycles in the 50-meter radius, and then also taking screenshots of each operator's app and the current information that they have. And then we had every month a follow-up with the scooter operators. And also with looking at how it looked in the apps, we could see that the operators are, the app information was better and better from every month that we had these follow-up meetings. From September to April, the follow-ups every time has shown that we have about 80 to 85% of the scooters correctly placed. And that is basically, we have no rules, no regulations, no way to enforce it. It's just that people are getting used to using this scooter zone as the place to pick up and drop off. So I think the solution is holding up also. We had a winter in Sweden this year with snow. That doesn't happen every year in Malmö. But even after that, these marine plywood plates are still holding up. It's a flexible, durable, and replaceable system. So that was basically a short introduction to the scooter zones.
Thank you very much, Sverker. And I really like the flexible application of your solution and how it can be quickly moved around. Again, two quick questions. One is on how are the operators working together on sharing the zone? And perhaps how have you maybe used data to manage, or even real-time data to manage the distribution applications of the zones? But starting off with the operators.
I would say at the moment, since these 20 zones were picked out basically in the meetings where all operators were attending. So they were each sitting with their own computers and looking at which areas they saw heavy traffic. So when they had said this is an area where we need a zone, it was for us a smart solution to put a zone in that area. And it's basically just a agreement between the operators. If there's 20 positions, of course, if Voi gets there, they cannot put 20 scooters in the zone that they could share. We never had anything that you can put 8 or you can put 7, but just if they're cooperating, they can put out scooters and still leave space for the other contenders or companies. So there's nothing that they are cooperating together because they also want to have a better parking solution with fewer complaints from the city and from other people in the city.
And on the point on real-time data, how have you used that in actually managing the zones?
We didn't have any real point data or any tool for that when we start out the test. Now the city is running a test of your tool to see. It is hard to see because GPS signals are still not accurate enough. So we cannot see if there's in the tool 20 scooters where it could be a zone. We cannot see exactly if they are in the zone or if they are 5 meters or 10 meters from it. But we can see the distribution of the scooters in the city and see if they are close to a zone.
Excellent, thank you very much. And again, we have questions coming in. Just keep them coming. I'm going to put them to all the panelists we get to the end of the 4 presentations. But I'd like to move ahead to Marc-Antoine Réal. Marc-Antoine is from Duckt, who are based in Estonia, although Marc-Antoine has been the country manager for Duckt in France for the past year. Prior to that, he worked over a number of years as a startup founder, as well as in a range of businesses in international business development and financial consulting. Over to you, Marc-Antoine.
Thanks, Dave. Thanks a lot. Happy to be here. Yeah, Duckt is a micromobility universal infrastructure solution. We dock, lock, and charge every model of vehicles, e-bikes or e-scooters, either private or public. So Next slide, please. Why we did that? Because shared micromobility is exploding. The McKinsey consulting company is expecting 50 million new vehicles in 2030, and those vehicles are looking for charging and parking solution in urban areas. That's why we did Duckt, the solution. Next slide, please. And not really. Anyway, so this explosion of shared micromobility is a growing pain for municipalities. Werker addressed it with this e-scooter parking solutions. That's what we want to do by creating a universal infrastructure. This growing pain is, as you know, from the disorder in public space to pedestrian safety issues. There is also high operational cost for the scooter operators, as well as vandalism and theft. And that's what we address with our solution. Next slide, Gilles, please. We really want Duckt to be a part of the next solution for the future of mobility in the cities, where there is more pedestrianization, more vegetalization, and more space for bike line and e-scooter line, like we call mobilité douce in French, soft mobility. Maybe with the next slide, we will go into our solution mostly, the one after, Gilles, sorry. Yeah, so basically, Duckt solution is a dock, a smart dock with a SIM card integrated, coupled with an adapter, RFID adapter. We are retrofitting the scooter or the e-bikes with our adapters, and then you can directly dock your scooter. We are sending the information to the operator. Like this, for the user, is a 1 second end ride solution. Is much better what is existing on the market, where you have to take a peek, or which is not easy thing to do for the user. So it's really a user experience oriented solution. And next slide, please, Jill. And we are super happy to be part of Urban Lab project. Urban Lab is an innovative lab of Paris municipality. We will deploy 17 stations and 140 charging points in the 13 area of Paris, Paris Rive Gauche. The idea of this project is linked to the subject of today, to create a mobility hub by connecting the biggest mobility hub like Gare de Lyon or Place d'Italie, as you can see in yellow on the map, to the main living area of Paris Rive Gauche, the French National Library, Station F, you know, the biggest startup incubator in Europe, and the University of Paris as well. So we will create a mobility hub to facilitate the last and first kilometers moving for Parisian, in order to avoid to offer a multimodal solution for Parisian in order to avoid to take them the cars. Sorry for my poor English, by the way. And sorry. And yeah, a part of that, this is also a really interesting project, because as you see on the map, 5 of these stations will be connected to the bike station, the actual bike station in Paris, known as Vélib. Paris is the biggest European municipality in terms of shared mobility, and we will create, in that case, a real micro mobility hubs, and we are really happy of that. And yeah, and it will be the occasion for us as well to show how the station model can be a way to reduce the environmental and operational costs for the micromobility operator. Stations, the infrastructure itself is it's okay. The infrastructure, I mean, there is of course environmental fixed cost to create infrastructure, but the durability of our solution will suffer this cost, and after 3 or 4 years of utilization, it will be much more efficient than the swappable model existing nowadays in the micromobility world. So we will be happy to demonstrate it in the near future in many cities. We have development in New York as well with e-bikes, with Joko Mobility, and hopefully soon in other European cities. Yeah.
Thank you very much, Marc-Antoine. And again, one particular question on almost the reaction of cities to the data that you're generating and providing around micromobility, mobility hubs. Just kind of, can you summarize a little bit more about kind of the thinking you're getting back from cities on those kinds of issues?
I'm not sure I understood you well, Gilles, on this question. Can you repeat, please?
But just kind of the reactions of cities and city authorities to the data that you would be generating or providing as a result of your technology within micromobility hubs. What's kind of the reaction you're getting back from city authorities?
Cities are always welcoming new data regarding road and traffic management. Our solution, as it's connected to the grid, also can provide other data as air quality, which is a main concern of the citizen in the cities, and also they are welcoming the idea of offering a way to park properly those free-floating solution, because as we said, even if, for example, Zwerker solution with a geofenced area, a dedicated geofenced area with the approximation of GPS, the lack of infrastructure, you have many scooters who are just falling down on the floor as e-bikes, which is increasing the need in maintenance, as well as reducing the aesthetic of the streets. So they are welcoming very well our solution in that regarding that matters. And the data we are providing is a nice addition, but it's not the main value we are adding to the mobility world.
Excellent. Thank you very much, Marc-Antoine. And we're going to move ahead to our final speaker, and then we'll have a more general discussion. So I'd like to welcome Richard Dilks. Richard has been the Chief Executive of CoMoUK for 2 years. CoMoUK is a charity that's been leading in the UK's transition to integrated mobility solutions designed for public good. They support shared modes such as car clubs, bike share, 2+ ride share, on-demand buses, and scooter sharing schemes. Previously, Richard was program director for the business group London First for 4 years and a board member at London Travel Watch for 6 years. Over to you, Richard.
Thank you, Giles, and hi, everybody. Really good to be on this call to be talking about hubs, which is something close to our heart and our work program here at CoMoUK. And great to be doing this with Vianova, who are one of our associate members. Next slide, please. Thank you. So a little bit on who we are. I shan't read out anything that's on these slides word for word, fear not. We are a few things in one, effectively, a charity for the public benefit of shared transport. That's the social, economic and environmental benefits specifically. We're also a collective body, that's with operators and also with authorities who work closely with both, run regular fora for both constituencies and events, meetings where those constituencies can come together, which I think is particularly important in the shared transport space. We're not, as you'll be guessing, defined by a mode. So we are very interested in this integrative space, whether that's physical, as in hubs, whether that's digital, or whether that's in policy terms. And to do all this, we have some main outputs: research with users and with operators and authorities; accreditation, we accredit car club and bike share, perhaps other modes in the future; and policy and advocacy work across shared transport in all its forms, across allied issues into public and transport and active travel, taxation and infrastructure policy. Next slide, please. So what do we mean by a hub? For us, it's somewhere where you can access active travel modes, walking and cycling, shared transport, optional options, public transport, optional options, and also there's some public realm intervention. This is an identifiable place. There's been some design thinking that's gone into making it a place. Next slide, please. Here's a mock-up, maybe familiar to some of you, which is what we Brits call the kitchen sink. So we've got sort of every different element in here deliberately, and you'll have seen quite a few of these in the real world in the previous presentations, which is great. Pick up and drop off lockers, shared bikes and scooters, shared, important point, EVs charging up there. Most importantly, some coffee, public transport, a totem and identifier, a digital pillar of some kind or non-digital pillar, and some covered seating there. That's the kitchen sink option, as I say. Next slide, please. There are then, here one that might look rather familiar to Rebecca, there are much smaller scale ones, and I think we'll see lots and lots of these in the UK, just as we do across continental Europe, as we've been hearing, and quite a lot of US cities and elsewhere. Next slide, please. There are other variants of this. This is at the end of a rail network. So this is rail hubbing in the jargon, done on a car basis, but importantly, again, shared cars. Next slide, please. And these don't all have to be in urban or even suburban contexts. We think there's a wide future applicability here on the trunk road network, and thinking about bus coach integration, the efficiency with which roads are used. There's a long way to go on this particular aspect of it all in the UK, certainly. We currently have no incentives for road building to be tied into efficiency of use. We simply assume that it's correct to do what we do, which is that we must provide space for any metal box that turns up, no matter how efficiently or inefficiently it is used. Next slide, please. So this is our map of hubs that we are aware of, a moving feast, as we say. So in fact, after a meeting this morning, it needs a couple of updates, and we only last updated it a couple of weeks ago. So things are developing fast here in the UK, which is really positive to see. Not all of these are built by any means. We have one, I think you could say, which is in London, which is up and running. We have a couple which we will be accrediting, which are in the pipeline. One soon to launch, one further away, a few months away probably. So a lot of positive action from a cold start. We did not get going when Rebecca and Bremen got going. We're just starting now, as you can tell. But fairly fast progress, and I really hope that we maintain that speed and build into that consistency, learning, refinement of best practice. Next slide, please. So we have an introductory guide. The link is there on the screen. It's on our website, and we break hubs down into 6 potential types that we think fit British contexts. I shan't read those out, you can see them on the screen, but you'll see that we are deliberately trying to exploit the inherent flexibility of the hub concept. We're thinking quite broadly. We're seeing these as things that have, yes, urban roles, but also suburban roles, also peri-urban roles, and also rural market town roles. Next slide, please. We've defined an accreditation standard, as I touched on just earlier. This is an example of one of our tables. We have, as you'll see, split it into essential and desirable criteria, and you need to hit all essentials in your category, and then a preset number of desirables, depending on if you're trying to get bronze, silver, or gold level of accreditation. And the accreditation is specific to the hub type, to avoid the scenario whereby every large hub ends up being gold and every small one or rural one ends up being bronze. Next slide, please. So as I mentioned at the start, the physical and digital twin here, people have been talking for a number of years about the phygital, the combination of these two things. This is at one time not a new debate. Of course, mobility as a service around as an applied concept for half a decade now, and at the same time it is a brand new debate in the UK, because I think in the last year or so, really, to my observation, we've finally got some sort of first level of maturity in the mass market, and we are examining what our role with this should be going forwards, but it's clear that we will need to have one. Apart from anything else, we certainly want to have one. It's very interesting talking to different stakeholders about hubs as people think about building them, as planning applications go in here. Some very much led by the physical aspects of this and thinking in those terms. Others at the more digital end of the spectrum really see the physical aspects as almost incidental and have the telescope the other way around. The government here is considering, it's only doing that, this is not a done deal, it's not guaranteed to happen, but it is considering a future of transport bill. And we've encouraged the government to think broadly about what should be in that bill. Its immediate question under consideration is e-kick scooters, which remain unlawful here on public highway outside trial areas. But we're encouraging you to think more broadly than that, and certainly mass is a prime area alongside transport data more broadly to be thinking about. It's a very natural fit, and for shared transport holds some particularly interesting opportunities, actually, I think, in ability to bring options together for users, increase utilization, and unlock more of the dividends that we find again and again, and we've just done our latest end of 2020 research on it, pertain to shared research in terms of efficiency, quality of life and place, activity levels, decarbonisation, and so on, and also to remove some of the barriers by the flip side that shared transport faces, lack of awareness, lack of coherence. That's me. Very happy to be here, delighted to take questions, look forward to more of the debate. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Richard. And again, lots of questions in there, but one I just wanted to pick on before we go to all of the speakers again. The role of e-services in mobility hubs, and is this the segue or the gateway into electrifying more and more perhaps shared micromobility services? Or how would you describe that tension or debate in the thinking about mobility hubs?
It certainly can be, and I hope it will be, but an asterisk on my answer of course, what I'm looking for is shared e-services. And I think it's fair to say the emphasis there is very mixed. So at one hand here we have the government pushing ahead with e-kick scooter trials, where the only form of legality there is on the rental version of these. That seems a very intelligent approach to us, because that's using schemes that you can control in lots of different ways, whether that's top speed or geofencing, etc., parking, and experimenting with that new to the UK mode. Bike share is increasingly becoming e-bike share, although not exclusively, of course. That's starting to make some progress on this front as well. But on the four-wheeled front, and we're doing some work on this, we're really very much in a world where thinking is all around the privately owned electric car and how that's going to be charged. Now that's, I think, has an interesting interplay with hubs. I think it can be part of the picture, but I don't think we should get confused that we'll be achieving our decarbonisation aims or other aims if we're simply swapping out the petrol diesel station for the electric, privately owned electric car charging station and calling it a hub. That's not what I mean by a hub, and I don't see that as the sustainable path forward. So there's a missing bit there about shared electric cars, which, as I say, we're working on, and I can foresee we'll be working on for a number of years here, actually.
Thank you very much. And actually going back to the other speakers as well. So Sverker, perhaps could you tell us a little bit more about incentivization for operators in Malmö in terms of using your mobility hubs? And then I'll raise that to the other speakers as well about incentivizing. But Sverker, to start with you.
Basically, it goes back to that since we took positions that they asked for, positions that they already saw that there was lots of trips starting or ending in these positions. That was local traffic, train station, local bus stations, big bus stops where lots of local bus lines were stopping, central shopping areas, university area, etc., etc. So there is, from the beginning, an initiative from them to use these hubs because they are in positions that they asked for, not positions that city planners decided on. And then, of course, 20 scooter zones has volume for 300 scooters, and there's 2,000, 2,500 scooters in the city. So, of course, there should be more zones to cover up the central areas and the busy areas of the city. That was maybe a short answer.
No, thank you very much. And Marc-Antoine, do you have something to add on incentives? So you're on mute.
Yeah,
okay.
yeah.
Go ahead.
Yeah, for sure. That's what we are thinking. By reducing the operational cost of the operator, we can also provide a cheaper ride for the users, and generalize the use of e-scooters or e-bike in the city. That's clearly something we want to develop. I'm not sure it's something we will be able to do in the Paris project, but for sure in the coming one. And with pleasure, Sverker, we can work on it.
Excellent. Actually, and again, the time's moving on. We'll probably spend about 5 more minutes on questions, and probably keep your questions coming into Q&A. But Rebecca, I'd like to come back to you on success for your mobility hubs in Bremen. How are you measuring success or capturing that the hubs are working well or they need to change?
So we measure success by looking at user growth in the area, and also awareness of the shared mobility services in the area. In 2018, Team Red Germany, external research institute, did a study for us on the impact of car sharing in Bremen. And when I say car sharing for the UK audience, I mean car clubs, just to clarify. I'll try and use both. We asked about questions about impact of car sharing on car ownership, but also awareness among non-users about the availability of services near them, and if they knew what car sharing was, who the providers were, and where was the nearest station. And 85% of non-users knew about it, and they knew where the next station was, and that's well above the national average. And to say also, to kind of brag a bit, it was also well above the awareness level of Munich, which is a city that's 4 times the size of Bremen, and also has larger, more obviously branded car share providers in the city. So there is a high level of awareness, and that is one in part from the mobility hubs, but also because we as a municipality do a lot of public awareness work around shared mobility, and that for over a long period of time and very consistently. So those two things have to go in hand in hand. The bricks, the physical, implementation of visibility, but also and the policies and the awareness work, like provider neutral ad campaigns that we do.
Excellent. Again, a question I want to raise, perhaps starting again with Richard, funding. Should mobility hubs be solely in the realm of the public sector, or should operators perhaps be putting more, if not all, of the funding to make these things happen and work? Then we'll go to the other speakers if they want to add to what Richard says as well.
Giles, I'm going to come back to you in about 2 months, if that's okay, because we're doing a piece of work on this, on the business models of hubs in the UK. Okay, no, I'm just joking. I think at the moment in the UK, we've got some private sector investment going in. That one I referenced in London is a BP trial site for a couple of years. That's purely private sector money, as well as quite a lot of taxpayer money going in. So we have various Department for Transport programs running into the tens of millions of pounds, which are largely going into hubs. And neither is right or wrong. I think we're going to end up with a range of different funding sources. That's clear. We're in this piece of work, we're going to dive deeper into that, and I think we'll also end up with some hybrids. So we're going to get some which are a blend of these things. Almost more important probably is not so much where the funding's coming from, but it's what kind of funding is it? here we're into the old familiar capital versus revenue debate. And certainly in the UK, we're fairly addicted to providing capital for such things. We're a lot less keen on providing revenue. So then the question becomes more, well, we've built the thing, but how do we keep it going? And related to that is, whose revenue stream, if there is one, is it? And what arrangements have we got around that? And then what's the commercial operational model, and how does that fit with the business case and where the revenues go? So we're trying to sort of unpick all that and disentangle that as best we can for people and publish this piece of work. We'll end up with a mix of things. I am keen that, as well as trying to have appropriate quality standards in play here and understand how these hubs are working, I think agree with that question very much about how are you going to know what's going on, what the impacts are. It's very important that gets measured, but it's also important we don't end up with, as we call them in English, some white elephants, which is definitely a concern for quite a lot of authorities. They know that they could perhaps get some funding to put something in place, but where are we in 5-10 years' time?
Excellent. And guys, we're coming to the end of time, so I'm just going to go to the speakers one last time all the way through. And final thoughts, but actually I'm also going to ask you, mobility hubs, do we do lots of very simple ones or smaller, larger, more comprehensive ones? That question and your final thoughts, Rebecca.
Easy question. Quickly, I do agree with Richard. It's got to be a mix of things. Funding. I think it's entirely justifiable to use taxpayer money to put in mobility hubs because there is a very clear public added benefit, or you can prove that. So as financing, the providers, their services finance themselves. So, but it's a mix of things. Regarding your question of lots of low tech or maybe a few high tech or very large, very clear. Our Bremen strategy is lots of low tech solutions. So lots of decentralized mobility hubs, bringing services closer to people, where the journey starts, not where it ends. So where people come from and not where they want to go. And you can accomplish a lot. You can accomplish a lot with low tech solutions simply by bringing the services close to the citizens, rather than putting all your eggs in one basket or all of your euros or dollars or pounds in one very high tech, very snazzy, fancy hub, but that only reaches few people or one neighborhood. So it's very, very clear. We focus on the bricks, on the physical integration before the digital integration. And sometimes we say definitely the low and no tech solution is the best with a great or a high level of impact.
Thank you very much, Rebecca. And Marc-Antoine, your final thoughts.
Me personally, I think that mobility hubs or e-mobility hubs is much needed in the cities to get remove of this gas-based transportation, which is a car, and which has been leading the policy in Europe the last 40 years after the Second World War. And there is much to do, and we're happy to be a part of this journey in Duckt. And but we're a bit high-tech solution, but still we are providing a solution which is named infrastructure as a service, which is helping cities to spend their money in other development by providing the station for free. So I will be happy to discuss further with anyone interested.
Thank you very much, Marc-Antoine. And over to you, Sverker.
The question for me very easy between low tech and high tech. I think our solution, the scooter zones, are no tech. Basically, I think we need to have a lot of them around the city. I think they may be 100 meters apart. If we look at a city like Malmö, there are 25,000 bike racks or places in bike racks for bikes within the city. And that's only the ones that we know of. Then the private ground owners can also put out bike racks on their property. So I think we need to get up to that volume, lots more more frequent. And then we need to keep them very simple and very cheap to construct, to install, and to move about when the needs are changing.
Thank you very much. And finally to you, Richard. Any final thoughts on the question on large or small?
Funnily enough, we're just really getting into this with the subgroup of authorities that are planning networks of hubs, which is now a clutch of about 8 in the UK, and they're all grappling with exactly this question: which way do they jump? I think, on the whole, there's a very strong argument, following on from what others have just said, for the as low tech as possible, as numerous as sensibly possible, as cheap as possible network that builds out quite quickly and comes to people and reaches scale. So I'm saying, if you make me jump, I'm saying small. Of course, there are some great use cases around big, and they'd be mad to not avail themselves, where one, for example, as a major hospital site, the whole place is being rebuilt. Crazy not to put a hub in there at that point. So that's what they're trying to do. And similarly, they've got the rail station and the road outside, it's being rebuilt along with the rail station. Again, crazy if you don't take up that opportunity.
Excellent. Thank you very much, Richard. Oops, sorry. There will be, before we get to the very end, I'd like to thank Rebecca Carboma from the city of Bremen, Sverker Haraldsson from the city of Malmö, Richard Dilks from CoMoUK, and Marc-Antoine Royal from Duckt for joining us today and sharing some of their thoughts on the role of mobility hubs in cities and opportunities for taking a data-led approach. Please listen to our earlier ViaNova webinars, as well as read our various white papers, and they're available on our website. And in particular, I'd like to highlight our recently published Delivering Mobility Hubs paper, which is available in our library. The link is on the screen at present. And our next webinar will be looking at taking a data-led approach to managing urban delivery services and curb space within cities. Thank you again very much for joining us this afternoon. There's a satisfaction survey, which you could, if you had a few minutes, you could fill in for us. But thank you, keep safe, and enjoy the rest of your spring. Thank you to our speakers again, and have a good afternoon.
Thanks to you, Jen.
Thanks.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye.